So great. Can you hear me? Yes, I guess so. Thanks for having me. Love Paris. We are talking about that thing, how to fail. Yeah, because I think you've learned a lot yesterday and maybe today, even now with this amazing Micronaut stuff. But I don't want to do that. So who I am? I'm David. I'm from Düsseldorf. That's our football team's logo, Fortuna Düsseldorf. It's something like the German Paris Saint-Germain, if you ask me. And you can find me everywhere using Königkotze, PlayStation, whatever. If you want to play FIFA, call me. I work for Zenacor, won't dwell on that. We are a consultancy. Come to me if you want to know what we are doing. So before I start, a grain of salt. Yeah? Everything I'm talking about is something that happened to me in my project. I have earned my gray hairs and everything. So, but things I say won't work, might work for you. That doesn't imply that I'm an idiot or you're an idiot. It depends, as always. I'm a consultant, so it depends. So let's start with this. You know, new CTO arrives and he reads about microservices, or she might be a boss. I have many female bosses now. And he or she opens her magazine and reads about Industry 4.0. Does that exist in France? Yeah? 5.0, okay, my bad. And then he reads about some Google guy or a Facebook man, CTO wearing a hoodie, and he says something about disrupt or be disrupted, super. And then it goes better, and he is extreme agile cloud native digital microservices deployed to the blockchain, and this is cool. He absolutely needs that for his golf partners, because when they have that, so she's like, IT people, whatever that is, go, here's the whip, make it happen, build me my microservices. And we turn and shrug, and what's that? And the important part, the first learning of today is this I'm feeling lucky. Mwah. So you go on and you find nice pages like where you see maybe some design, UML, or whatever we are using today about microservices, single bounded context, UI and services, and independent releases, and blah, blah, blah. I don't care. It's too much text. Fat cats and cat pictures are just too funny, and you know, the internet doesn't serve itself. So the only question I want to ask is, do you really prefer change? That's changing behavior, changing mindset. Do you prefer this or rest? And we all know rest is an awesome paradigm, so rest it is. I don't care about anything else. So what I'm going to talk about is something like a sabotage countdown. If you apply those patterns, you will fail, I promise you. And we applied those patterns. I personally applied those. So this is, the first thing is really easy, is Polyglot. I've heard today, at least in 3 talks, that with microservices you can finally go Polyglot. Amazing, super cool. And there's this game, Where's Waldo? And for those who don't know, this guy, he's Charlie, he's Waldo. So it's a child's game where you have this big book with lots of pictures and you have to find the Wookiee or Charlie. So how does it work? Let's say you have a couple of teams. First team starts, by the way, this is mostly Java and JavaScript developers, I guess. That's using Phoenix and a Postgres database for a microservice. Awesome framework, awesome database, super performant, great. There might be some JavaScript dudes in your company who prefer Angular for some reason, and Happy, an awesome framework for RESTful APIs, and of course, low-scale Mongo. And last but not least, our typical Java stack with React and some Spring Boot and Neo4j database. Who am I kidding? Who is using React? There's Vue now. So, and this is already pretty cool, you know, if you keep talking to your colleagues. But we need not stop there. We can introduce build systems, you know, Bower, Gulp, Gradle, SBT, Maven, NPM, Webpack. And you can combine those using the power of scripting. It's super cool. But we're in the cloud age. We don't stop there. So we use Kubernetes. We use Docker, maybe Docker Swarm on top of Kubernetes, even better. And of course, Terraform and Chef and Puppet. And who knows Chef and Puppet? You might wonder why both. Because I can. That's the. So this is what I call William Wallace tribute teams. That means teams who like freedom. I don't want to be told what I use. Yeah. And the cool part is also that when you keep busy, you are busy redeveloping your solutions in different tech stacks. Let's say you have your security solution for Java, but there's a team using Node.js, so you have to develop the exact same thing in Node. That means no time for business code. Super easy, because that's the fun part. And there's also this thing like, are there Elixir developers here? Yeah, see, you're looking, what's Elixir? What's he talking about? Nobody knows Elixir, so maybe they're all sick and you have to debug some crap in their microservice. So this is a great field trip. And you can combine this with, of course, with Polyglot UIs, with beta status. Works for Kubernetes, by the way, also. Everything is beta in Kubernetes, so it's cool. But not everything is bad. We can find new friends on Stack Overflow when you ask questions. But maybe you are still successful. Semantic versioning, who's not familiar with that? Java developers, one person, I will explain it. It's just the basic idea that you split your versions into 3 parts, a major version, which indicates breaking changes, minor for features, which are mostly compatible, and of course bug fix. Major, minor, bug fix. And for JavaScript developers, this is a pretty amazing concept, because with that command, you can list the dependencies of your projects, and with that grep, I am looking for version 0. And quite astounding, because I'm a Java developer for I don't know how long. But it seems that in JavaScript land, the 0 is the new 1, because everything is version 0. So, okay, who am I to judge, huh? That's why I don't call this Polyglot, I call this PolyWTF, because you get this WTF in every stack. So that's the first step, easy. Let's talk about the data monolith. Who's using a single database for his or her microservice? Yeah, see, this is for you. Here's an architectural diagram what I'm talking about. You can see 2 microservices circling the database. And actually, this goes back to a true story which I had as a bank, where an enterprise architect approached me, and he was super happy and said, Mr. Schmitz, I'm so glad. Yesterday, we moved our final application onto our DB2. They had a giant DB2 for all their services, and you can imagine German banks are pretty big, and yeah, great idea. Nevertheless, the idea is you have this obviously expensive enterprise SQL database, so everybody needs to use that, and you have a couple of microservices, credit, account, and payment. You can see I work for the financial industry. And be sure to reuse that data. Let's see, on the right, left-hand side, there's a blue table, obviously belonging to credit somehow. And there's some data that also interests account, so account uses that table, right? Why should we use schemas or something like that? That's okay. That's the state of 2003, I guess. And along comes business. And they have this crazy idea where account names might be really long, 200 characters instead of 50. The account team shrugs and says, well, sure. They go into production, alter table, and they change the definition of that column. And in production, the other team is pretty amazed that now the usernames are pretty long and they blow up. And the cool part is this happens in production, not before, because no automation. Sharing is a good thing. Share your data. Share your databases, share your resources. It's really important. Never take ownership. Ownership is responsibility. Responsibility means overtime. And do you guys and girls still have business analysts in your company? I guess so, yeah? People that, I get UML diagrams and stuff, I guess. You can paralyze them. Just ask them for a complete domain model of all entities in your company. That will take for years. And if you hate your ops people, just keep them awake with dependencies they don't know about. Yeah? Microservices sharing the same connection pool to the database and stuff like that, where you can keep the database running with crazy SQL queries and nobody knows what's going on. This is cool. And last but not least, think about Christmas is soon. Everybody likes surprises, right? There were a couple of event-driven, event source talks today. Is anybody here using event sourcing and CQRS in their projects? With Kafka? Keep your hand raised. Do you like your life? No, I guess not. Huh? Just kidding. Kafka's amazing. So, event sourcing, I like that thing. It's an architectural pattern. I will not explain it in detail. The idea is basically you have some kind of event store, whatever that is, and instead of updating data, you append so-called domain events. Like in this case, a new customer was onboarded or a new credit was acquired. That thing contains fact about real-life things that happened. And they are ordered in the direction of time. And no, I would not construct it like this, everything in one single stream. Of course not. So let's say we have a microservice, and that microservice emits new events. In this case, the customer has changed his home address, you relocated. And if there's a different microservice, the microservice just subscribes to those events and builds up its own view of the world. Pretty amazing architectural style. Gives you an audit trail completely for free, only a good part. It handles this. I saw so many talks where the question was, how does one microservice call the other at runtime? Event sourcing can help you. Keep breaking everything, thank you. And obviously you can use CQRS to optimize your microservices and much more. That's enough. So we had this payment system, really large, running for a couple of, nearly a year and a half. And business suddenly found out that beautiful Austria is not a country code, surprisingly. And this is not a joke. We had some banks in Bavaria, and they entered Bavaria as their country code. It only happens in Austria and Bavaria, nowhere else. Everybody, just imagine, country code Marseille. Anyways, how do we deal with that? It's really easy because the customer system reads obviously all this data. You have country, das schöne Österreich, and the real country code, and we have some kind that we call compensation code. Just a couple of lines, nothing bad. But we have this other microservice, credit, and this brings me to the question, how do we deal with code between microservices, shared code? A common library that we share, but then we are not independent, then we are coupled by better idea. That thing. That's a cool tool, and we can even give it a name, copy and own. There's a Windows version coming soon. You just need to type 3 letters, copy and paste, and off you go. What could go wrong? Let's look here. Works. But 2 months later, and I'm not joking, once again, we had this microservice, then that, then that, then that, then that. And then we had a bug in that fragment of code. And I will explain the code, and I'm so disappointed. Once again, 2 months later, let's talk about those events. Let's talk about that thing. And then let's use the power of YouTube, where I gave this talk, and there's some variant, not this talk, but something like this. And then we need to talk about the world map. That is Australia. And that's Austria. No kangaroos, but yeah. I guess we just update the event story. It seems easier. So in summary, wet is the new dry. Who knows wet? Who knows dry? Exactly. Dry is don't repeat yourself, and wet is we enjoy typing. Never question the design. Every system must be event sourced. I saw that Micronaut demo with this greeting. I was wondering why that thing is not event sourced, basically. And in German we have a nice way of speaking about such things like eventual consistency. You could translate like eventuell consistent. That means maybe consistent, and that's super awesome for speaking to your business side. Doesn't work in French, however. And as I said, if you want really fun, use Kafka for event sourcing. If you're wondering why, come to me, I can explain it to you. You can do it with Kafka, but it's interesting. Next topic, homegrown monolith. Raise your hand. Who has not ever built a framework at work? You are lying. You are a liar. There was one raised hand, by the way. So to paraphrase Carl Sagan, a famous astrophysicist, he once said, if you want to build microservices, you need a framework. And that works this way. We have, once again, our microservices, and as I said, we are using event sourcing. And the first thing we are doing is we build event sourcing frameworks, like in this case, ES. And that thing was pretty simple. It could emit such events, and obviously this is really simplified, yeah, with an ID and some event payload, and everybody was happy. And away goes, by the way, the Polyglot thing, because that event source framework was built on Java, so we were stuck with JVM stuff, so no Polyglot for us. But you notice it's not so complicated. Sounds reasonable, right? But then the business side decided that the IDs must be special. And the reasonable thing would have been to fight that decision and do something else, but fighting is difficult. So we applied the power of semantic versioning and released a new version of that framework, version 2. And you can see, or you can't see due to the lights, you can see that the new ID in red, in deep red, is now formatted according to some business rules. What could happen? At runtime, the other microservices, they didn't migrate, they were still stuck with the old framework. They weren't expecting something crazy in the ID, and they exploded at runtime. You can't really test that before. That's what I call a change the world event, like atomic bombs or something like that. So everybody has to migrate to the new framework, which is not a big deal, right? It is a big deal because in microservices, we have this paradigm of independent releases, flexible choices. When do we want to go into production? That's crazy. That's hard, that's difficult. And using a framework, we get back to a release monolith. And why is this cool? Because that time is Twitter time. And being a consultant, just imagine 3 teams, 3 microservices. What do you need for actually getting those into one big release? Obviously, a release manager. So, day rates, good for me. So dependencies, I consider them social tools. You meet other people. You know, like, what have you been doing with that thing? And on the other hand, if you build frameworks, difficult times for everybody. So this is job security. If you build some really invasive stuff that you can't get rid of, this is cool. And obviously this is fun, to be honest. I like building frameworks. Not using them, but building them. Now, of course, we can build this event sourcing framework in multiple languages, even ones we don't use. And if you need some ideas, how about the new collection framework for Java? I think there are just 2, I guess. String utils always works. Logging, of course. There hasn't been much going on in the ORM space, as far as I'm aware. And for JavaScript developers here, by the way. Yeah, I will cover you too. You can always build a new UI framework, or left pad, maybe right pad next time. But this takes time. What if you don't have that time for a side project or stuff like that? What if you want to stay on Twitter? What's the easiest way to leave your mark on this world? Super easy. New date stamps. Your operations team will hate you. Just look at that thing, that abomination. 060516, what's going on there? That's my blood pressure or my zip code. Just do that, works great. Meet Cloud, this is about operations. Any DevOps or operators here? Okay, so this is for you. But before we can start with that, let's optimize once again our revenue. That's the WKPT paradigm I've invented. You have to split people into who wants something to be done, who knows how to do it, Who has the privileges? Who has the actual time to do it? 4 people. Why 4? Of course, day rates, as always. But going back to the topic, being good developers, we are using, not anymore Jenkins, by the way, but other tools, but we have automated everything until production, everything works smoothly. But that's not all of the story, right? There are some other things. There's like the operating system, there's the load balancer, there's a reverse proxy, Docker host, and whatever. While we decided to use soulless automation, which nobody can be proud of actually, because robots, we decided to handcraft this with love. But now I see some people who say, what about this cattle, not pets? Who's not familiar with that saying? Just asking. Okay, a couple of friends. The basic idea is that in the cloud paradigm is, and infrastructure as code paradigm is, that you treat your service like cattle. If there's something wrong with it, you kill it, you spin up a new cattle. And not like pets, where you give your server names like Fluffy or whatever. But I would challenge that thing, really. Just ask yourself, whom do you love more? Mrs. Whiskers or that walking steak? And I like cows, to be honest. So, but back to the topic. Business once again wants a new customer microservice really fast because hot fixes or whatever. And then there is, of course, not a DevOps person in your team. There's obviously a DevOps team because that's what DevOps means, building distant teams somewhere else. Any ideas how to effectively communicate with a different team? Somebody. No stupid ideas here. HipChat, for example. Yeah, HipChat would work. Chat tools, yeah. No, of course not. Tickets. Enter Jira. And I'm not kidding, we did that thing. You specify the environment, of course production, and then say, hey, ops guys, please release a new version of our microservice. And it should be exposed using /customer. And our ops colleagues, they have fancy tooling for actually maintaining those routes called VI. So they open the Nginx configuration, default conf, and they start typing, la la la, nothing can go wrong, except, of course, yeah. And a few minutes later, we didn't notice anything actually until we spun up our Kibana dashboards and our Grafana dashboards. And here's a snapshot. You can see our hopes and plans burning in the background. Looks awesome, but so infrastructure is expensive. If everything goes smoothly, nobody can be proud, right? So be proud to take care of it. Take your time. Somebody asks, Microsoft Word has macros. So this is automation, you're right? Excel, yeah, also. No? And I'm 40 now, so sometimes younger colleagues come to me and say, can't we change? No, of course not. We're not Google, so go away. And I will come back to that later. Sometimes we Java developers riff on JavaScript ecosystem for not being as mature and stable or whatever. Look at the ops tools. JavaScript can learn a lot from them. So the distributed monolith, that's pretty easy. That goes to way back when we started building microservices, actually. Way back, 5 years or something. Let's say we have these microservices, once again, customer, credit, and account. And back then there was always this paradigm where we have the central microservice responsible for authorization, checking that the user has the appropriate rights and whatever. So that means when customer wants to do something, the service asks the authorization service whether or not a user has certain credentials. That was before JWT and smarter solutions. So once again, the business side comes along and they decided to offer a new discount to our users. That means that a couple of users arrive at our authentication system and the system is, don't care, easy. And then more people arrive because we are successful and our services, what's going on? What's the rush? And then of course even more people arrive and everything just goes down to hell. because everything belongs together. The cool part is, that sounds easy, but actually what's really cool is that this combines the best of both worlds. Like in the US, they eat marmalade and peanut butter, which I don't get, but whatever. It combines the complexity of having microservices with everything beneath it, with the rigidity and the fragility of having a monolith. Everybody thinks you are building microservices, but instead, everything just breaks down. I've read a paper last week that Google employees effectively treat their internal network bandwidth as infinite. So I guess that's the clear sign that the network is reliable and we should never worry about failures. Dependency injection is a good thing, so dependencies to other services must also be a good thing. That's what words are for. And just to be honest, to be stable as concrete, this is cool, right? I mean, being stable as concrete, I would love to say that of myself. And you can debug that stuff. Who can debug asynchronous systems? And last but not least, what's half a system good for? I've heard this nonsense today about circuit breakers and graceful degradation. I mean, really? Do we really want to sell tickets to concerts just because users can't log in? No, of course not. Either everything works or nothing works. Who's an architect? Or who considers herself or himself an architect? Oh yeah, I've got that in my title too. So this is for me. This is my love letter, basically. Once again, a young developer arrives with her dreams. She read some magazine on the weekend and she wants Java 7 in 2018. Believe it. Beware developer madness. As an architect, I can judge stability. They can't, surely not. But how can we deal with that? There's some stuff like blockchain, actors, RX, IoT, and what have you not. I can't deal with that stuff, so I developed a simple tool once again, the architectural and design sieve of sanity. It's a sieve for good ideas. How do we apply it? It's easy, like a sieve. You take all these ideas young people come up with, and you apply the sieve, and only the good things remain. It sounds easy, but the effects are enormous. I have children, 3, 2 teenagers, so I'm really frustrated when I go to work on Monday. And if there's some guy or girl who approaches me and says, oh, let's introduce that, and I can say, no, get lost. Frustration goes away, venting. You can irritate colleagues with changing directives. No, we can't do Scala. Oh, we must do Scala. Every day you change your opinion and they don't know what's going on. And hopefully they leave. And once again, being older than 30, I can play this is real enterprise. This is not a playground. We do real stuff here. We've got big problems. And last but not least, I don't get that. Ivory towers. Those things are beautiful. You know Lord of the Rings? The Orthanc Tower? That thing is a thing of beauty. I want to live there. Better than my small home. So being an architect is awesome. But business is also part of the equation. We all know those business people. If they were smart, they would be programmers, right? So we don't explain anything. Leave them in the dark. How does it work? We are smart. We know how to split up the domain because being developers, we are cool. But from the product point of view, it's just some product thingy. So he once again comes along and says, we always want only valid addresses in the system, which have been checked if the address really exists. But there is a different product owner, and she says no. For example, if a house is being built or a road is being constructed, there is no valid address in that sense. So how do they argue? How can they actually say something about that system? How do we leverage that thing? I can tell you, with what I call requirements ping pong. The one PO says left, the other says right, and they will be busy for days, and for that they need change management and requirements management, and I get the day rates. So awesome me. By the way, works with ops too. We had that at a different financial institute where we had, as I said, a couple of microservices, but ops was only informed that there is something deployed, and we've built something, and they needed to release something new, and they shrugged and said, well, just deploy everything. They put the whole dev stage onto production, and you are laughing. It was not my finest moment. This is what I call the water scrum fall, where you differentiate between business, development, and ops. And here's an illustration. I guess you can see what happens. Yeah? So avoid cross-functional teams at all costs. At all costs. If you are slower, it means more time for Twitter. You can follow all the Voxed events. You can watch the videos, and to be honest, if you serve 2 kings or queens, you're a free person. You can always tell the other guy, I'm working on that thing, and nobody knows what's going on. As I said, Conway's law works both ways, so play them. This is a rather new pattern, the prescriptive cloud. I need to find an easier word. It used to be an alpha pattern because I needed more proof. It was last year, but not anymore. Why do we go into the cloud? Because we want to move more flexible. We want to use only resource that we really need. We want to try things out. That's what leads us to the OSFA cloud. Anybody ever heard of the OSFA cloud? No? That's the one-size-fits-all cloud. How does it work? Let's say we are building a Node.js to-do app. Everybody does that. Yeah? To-do apps is great. It might have 10 users now, but what if we are really successful, like next week? So once again, enter the DevOps team, but now rebranded to the CloudOps team. Because same processes and same problems. What do we use for going into the cloud? Do we use something like an EC2, or do we use something to orchestrate our microservices? Of course, we know. Yeah, maybe something in-house made. Yeah, but we use Kubernetes here in our example. We can build it yourself, of course, and you should maybe. So how does it work? You take your to-do app, you put it in. By the way, that Node.js to-do app is 10 megabytes. You put it in a Docker, choose Ubuntu because large, and then you put it on a Kubernetes node. That's not how Kubernetes works, but you get the idea. And then you deploy that to EC2. And just to remind you, that's what we care about. And then we ran into some issues with Amazon, and I'm not joking, we got 3 billion lines of crappy log code, which we needed to analyze. I don't get the solution, but I just stumbled on that log segment. Memory C group out of memory, kill process, score 769 or sacrifice child. What is going on? I mean, back in the Stone Age. So PolyWTF works for ops. And if you need some help deciding, that's from Xebia Labs. Just pick a Dart file and choose your tools, I guess. Works cool. Works fine. So once again, be proud of complexity. We are engineers. We're not here to kid around. As I mentioned, ops tooling, it looked at JavaScript landscape and said, hold my beer, I will teach you something. And my favorite thing is, I really love debugging YAML files. Really, who thought that getting rid of XML, going to JSON and then to that thing was a good idea? Maybe assembler next time, or I don't know. But really, if Twitter runs on it, maybe you should too. And the best thing is, if you don't automate all those things, just configure AWS using VI and AWS CLI. That's really cool. So if you combine that with Meet Cloud, nobody will come to you. So the last and saddest pattern is the staffing monolith. And the underlying assumption is it's far easier to search for a React developer than from general craftswomen or craftsmen. Yeah, and that's the same if you look for a guy that fixes your home and you're looking for a wielder of hammers instead of a wielder of screwdrivers. So that's, yeah, okay, who am I to judge? The approach is like, we have our business side in Hamburg, because they are the banks. We have our front-end development team in Dresden, service development in Munich, because the beer is awesome. Krakow is a nice city, and last but not least, Frankfurt, DevOps, because Amazon is there, so why not? But why would I do that? I can tell you. Frequent flyer programs, rail bonus programs, hot credit points. Somebody has to collect them. But careful, this could work. How do we make this not work? How do we communicate between those teams? Only with documents. The magic specification template. If the front-end developers want to know how your REST interface works, you don't speak to them. You give them your Swagger file. Should be obvious. Yeah? They can generate whatever they need and off they go. Will work, definitely. Then protect the teams. We are developers. We are really sensitive. I am sensitive. I don't like different people. So establish walls between those teams. And our friends, bureaucracy. That means every horizontal team gets its own product owner. Yeah, but let's call him product owner because that sounds agile. Because day rates once again. Eh? But what if that works? There's one final thing we can do, namely the fakeholder. What is a fakeholder? Every company has that. It's a person posing as your stakeholder that actually isn't talking to any user or any other need whatsoever of your product. Also known as a shadow product owner or proxy product owner. You know what I mean. So there's a chain of command. We have those product owners. They report to different product owners who decide or may not decide things. And of course, you have imagined multiple layers, not only 3, let's say 20. And on the left-hand side, we have the digital business owner. And the important part is the right-hand side cannot decide, and the left-hand side doesn't care. This even sounds agile. Super cool. But are there technical benefits? Maybe. Let's say we have this architecture diagram with some nice digital click, whatever, and those HTTP things crazy people do, and persistent stuff is also bad. We get shared stability. If the persistent stuff breaks down, everything breaks down. If the HTTP things break down, the UI won't work, I guess. Once again, our friend, the shared release. Don't forget that. And the domains are non-existent. What's a front-end domain? What's a back-end domain? So you can't reason about your system. So changes take longer. You have to analyze everything all the time. Keep in mind, programmers hate people. That's why we are programmers, We are just sitting in the cave, not talking to each other, maybe grunting. Are you finished? Play find the domain. As I said, this is if you like puzzles, this is cool. And this is dear to my heart. When my wife asked, what were you come home at 11 o'clock, what were you doing? I tell her, I've been debugging production because everything was up in flames. You're crazy, I get divorced. But if I tell her I'm in a war room with upper management, in a Tiger task force, this sounds really great. This strong man. Never take up ownership. And if there are bugs, it's obviously front end. So wrapping up, microservices are hard, too much work. Just building a big enterprise archive on WebSphere, where the boot time takes 45 minutes. You can do stuff in that time, drink coffee. The monolith starts in your head. If you try to think in domains, domain-driven design, bounded context, you're already on the way to microservices, so stay clear of that. Yeah? Please. And you shouldn't be too obvious, because if you start really breaking things down with Git, everything can be traced. But if, by accident, a wrong design decision, who would have known that this was a bad idea? The hidden monolith, that's the key. And please, microservices are purely technical. Never involve business, ops, or somebody else who's not a programmer. They should be left in the dark. That's what I get for coming up with all those requirements. And that's already all. Thank you. Questions? I guess not. But feel free to come to me afterwards if you want to talk. And thanks for your attention, having me.